what's going on, y'all? T-Bob here.
And Jake as well.
And you're about to watch a little OTB LSU.
We're going to give you all the latest, greatest between LSU football, baseball, women's basketball, softball, and everything in between.
Bottom line, if you want to talk Tigers, keep it locked, subscribe, like it. Give you a couple comments. Okay, I'm going to play you a couple clips that are likely to trigger a bit. They were going to start just right off the top. Give me Kelly 1 à l'entrée.
From Monday or post-game?
Monday.
Okay. The final thoughts.
Yes.
Okay.
Alabama is a fine football team. They played well. They were consistent. They did a really good job of self-scouting and making a decision as to who they were going to be in this game. They came out with a purpose and wanting to control the line of scrimmage, which they did, ran the football effectively, and were consistent in what they did. We were inconsistent, and that really is the difference. We had an opportunity to score a touchdown on the first drive. We weren't able to secure a catch. We turned the football over. We had chances to get off the field on third down. At times we weren't in the right alignments. So our guys were up for the fight. They played hard, but that's not good enough if you're not consistent.
Jake, what's your reaction when you hear that?
I mean, yeah.
It's true.
I mean, it's true. It's all factual, and it does roll downhill, and you got blown out. But there's a couple of scenarios in the game that you have to ask yourself, what if this happened? And he's right. Like from the very get-go, if Kyron Lacey catches that pass, all right, then it's 7-7. And then it's a different ball game. If Nussmeier doesn't throw an interception, then it's potentially going to be 21-14 if you go for two and make your conversion there.
Well, that's the inconsistency, right?
Yes,
that he's talking
that's what
about
he's talking about.
versus Alabama,
where they took advantage of every single thing you gave them.
I mean, I think that just speaks to exactly what we said after the film review. That is a team that got outcoached and outplayed top to bottom. Like that's exactly what that soundbite speaks to of me when he's talking about them doing a good job of self-scouting, them doing a good job of executing, of dominating the trenches. It speaks to both LSU players and coaches completely getting outperformed. Here is Kelly 2 from yesterday's press conference about how when you look at it, they're kind of the same position they were last year.
Look, this is the same exact place we were last year, coming off of a loss. And so I'm going to get asked the question, what do you have to play for, all of these things. You could ask Ole Miss that when they went and beat Georgia, right? There's nothing to play for. Now they've put themselves with 2 losses, and what they feel is in the mix. We're in the same position. We've got 2 losses. Let's see where it ends up at the end of the year. What's more important is that we have to play more consistent offense, defense, and special teams. That's what's most important, not the playoffs, not anything else. Consistency in the way we play in and play out is the most important thing.
So I think that, and look, the latter half of that is true. On the Ole Miss front, I think you hear that and you're like, what are you talking about? You have 3 losses. You're already out of it. Like that was the whole point of last week. I think he means purely in the SEC because right now you could potentially have 8 6-2 SEC teams when this is all done, and the tiebreakers could get really, really weird. I mean, I think the Ole Miss point is kind of a bad one, but I'm just trying to add maybe a little bit of explanation there. Finally, Brian Kelly was asked about, like, how does he feel? This is going to be Kelly 11, Alondra. How does he feel about the overall direction of the program?
So did we not win 14 consecutive games at night and we lost our first game? I would say that from that perspective, the odds are that I'm feeling pretty confident that we know what we're doing. Am I happy about what would happen? No. And our players? No. Nobody is. Especially, when you have an opportunity, as I just mentioned, to get that game into a 1-score game and have a chance to come back and win the game. But when it comes to an overall look at the program over the last year, we won 10 out of our last 13 games. So I'm not in a position to worry about what people are saying about the overall health of the program. We have one of the top recruiting classes in the country. Those things are only going to continue to get better. And a championship program is what we're going to have here.
So I ask you then, group, how do we feel about the current state and direction of the LSU football program as Saturday's loss. I think you could not have scripted anything worse in terms of creating anger and bitter resentment amongst the fan base. But it is one data point. So how do you feel overall about where this program is and is going right now?
You could definitely tell, like even going into the A&M game, and you and I talked about it, you were getting the absolute most out of what you had. Like you squeezed every bit of juice out of this current team.
Yeah.
And credit to you for getting to that point. But there's certainly deficiencies on the roster that have to be looked at, have to be fixed. And in today's college football, it is incredibly difficult to create depth. And you're seeing teams like Georgia suffer because of it. Mm-hmm. Georgia no longer has stacked 5 stars on 5 stars like they always have, since Kirby's taken over, because kids aren't going to wait anymore. You're not going to get a redshirt sophomore 5-star that's waited his turn. So, like, how do you create depth is going to be, something that's talked about in the offseason, because this LSU team does not have depth. You had one offensive line injury, and it all goes to hell.
Yeah.
And we talked about if you had one linebacker injury, a true freshman was going to have to come in.
Yeah.
Defensive backfield feels that way as well. So there's a lot of positions. It's how do you create that depth? What can you do through the transfer portal to, build this roster maybe where it is deficient going into this next season? So, I mean, there's question marks, and it's something that's changed across the country. And you look at roster management, it's more important than ever. That's the obvious statement. So high school recruiting certainly helps with what they have coming in.
You got to land this class.
Now we'll see how they finish this. I mean, it can't be 8-4. It certainly can't be 7-5. Now, if you finish this thing off, I think you can sell that. You can still sell the future depending on who you play in a bowl game and how that happens there.
I think you got to win that bowl game too. 9-4 is not going to be good enough.
No, you do have some solid wins on your resume.
Yeah.
But it's who you lost to, how you lost to that team that's going to have everybody angry. It's you lost to a non-Nick Saban Alabama.
Yeah.
Alabama's a team that nobody likes. They don't want to hear Kalen DeBoer's record.
Well, and you lost to a non-Nick Saban Alabama and a Nick Saban final score.
Yes.
That's
what I'm saying, the way it played out.
Part. If you would have lost a close game, the fallout would not be nearly as extreme right now.
Yeah, and it's the way you lost to Texas A&M.
Yeah.
Like if you go to Texas A&M and you lose 31-24, it kind of played out like a little bit of a back and forth. You never really quite had the momentum. You never had the lead.
A hell of a 90 minutes of football. Guys.
No, for sure. And then if you do that, a lot of people had you losing before the season. I think I had it as the most difficult game on the schedule. Like whenever Hunt was doing his little predictions. But it's how you lost the game. You're up 17-7. You have every single ounce of momentum. They were about to leave the stadium. I was sitting right above the student section. They were in the tunnels about to leave. You gave them something to cheer for. They stayed. They impacted the game. So all of that kind of matters and how you got to your record. But there's certainly places on this roster, and every coach would agree too, that have to be fixed as you head into next year.
I would say this. On the recruiting front, you've done a really good job overall of, kind of starting to re-solidify the borders of the state and keeping people in here. And then when you look at this class, being a top 5 class, you have to finish in the top 5. I'm not so married to Bryce Underwood. I know a lot of people are, and I love Bryce Underwood, and I would love for him to be an LSU Tiger. I'm just acknowledging the fact that 5-star quarterbacks finish with the school that they sign with less than 50% of the time. So you have to. So I always kind of in those type of situations, I just kind of expect it to not work out because that's what it actually does the majority of the time. But when it does work out, then you get super excited. Whatever. But like me, I'm a big believer in recruiting from a macro standpoint. So I don't care about the individual recruits, but I do think you need to be high in the team rankings. I think that's how you keep up. So I think you got, like, if you land a top 5 class, A+ marks. You got to keep that going. You got to land this class. As far as the results themselves and what I thought 3 years ago versus what I think now, I think it is very clear that Coach Kelly is a very high floor coach. Now they're going to have to finish, try to prove this, right? But I think they do a good job of avoiding the disastrous years, the spirals, like 2008. You win a championship in 2007, learn Les Miles, and you go 8-5, 3-5 in the SEC the next year. We all know about the fall off post 2019, right? In the Edo era. Like, I think it's hard to see a Kelly team falling off quite that badly. However, it is also impossible to say that I feel the same way about Brian Kelly's ceiling that I did 3 years ago. Because the whole idea when him and Notre Dame broke up was that Notre Dame was the ceiling and that he was bumping up against it, but he was held back by South Bend. And that when you put him down here, a place where the ceiling is clearly national championship and has been for the last three coaches, well, you put him down here and he will finally be able to rise to the level that that his skill and ability to manage a program and coach football would dictate, right? Well, we're now 3 years in, and you're eliminated again. Again, like we said, in probably the most bitterly disappointing way possible by the Alabama Crimson Tide. And Notre Dame has won losses in the driver's seat to be in the first 12-team playoff.
Yeah.
And so it's hard, in that breakup, you're like, well, you know what? Maybe some of that wasn't just on Notre Dame, on Kelly as well. And so, look, I'm not saying that he's incapable. I'm saying I thought it was almost a for sure thing. I don't feel that anymore. I think his ceiling is questionable. However, a high floor coach is not the worst thing to have. And this is where I actually really like the Scott Woodward contract. This is not a Jimbo Fisher situation where it's a complete disaster and you are on the hook. It is not a complete disaster. And the contract forces you to have patience. Because when I look right now, I love the new staff. The new defensive staff that you remade over the offseason. I think they paid real dividends. I think they're only going to continue to pay bigger and bigger dividends down the road. I think if you make look at Florida, okay? Florida's doing pretty good under Jen McElwain. They run him out of town. Doing really good under Dan Mullen. They run him out of town. And look at him now. They're going to finish maybe barely or not even bowl eligible, and yet they have to bring their coach back because it makes the most sense. So, you better be careful trying to make these giant sweeping. These are major changes, a regime change are. They're expensive, and there is no guarantee of success on the other end. So, I am very comfortable with a high floor coach that maybe still can break through versus blowing it all up or advocating to blow it all up and going and restarting this process and taking another bet. No, I think that sounds like the dumbest idea I've ever heard in my life.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree with you, and that's a slippery slope. That can turn on you real quick. There's multiple examples I think we could give. Now, there's some you could give the other way as well. Look at USC, and I know they beat you. I get that, but look at Lincoln Riley right now and where they're at.
Yeah,
and what they're doing. They replaced Miller Moss. UCLA right now has more wins than USC. UCLA, I wouldn't be shocked if they beat USC. So it is a slippery slope there. And then, as far as the people that you brought in on defense, I know nobody's going to want to hear this because of what happened on Saturday night, but you're in a much better position than you were.
Yeah.
Going back and watching the tape, now there's some individual efforts from players that certainly, if we want to, and if we want to pull it up, we can talk about finishing plays when you're in a position to make a play.
About Major Burns deciding not to hit Jalen Milroe. That's
absolutely
a bad look. Mr. Go 30 done played him on.
I saw that. I saw that one on coach's tape. Yeah. So I know they saw it before Mr. Go 30 found it.
Yeah.
The end zone copy's worse. So it's not just one thing right now. You got to take a look at, if you're a player on this team, you got to take a look in the mirror as well. And this game against Florida is a series you've dominated, right? 11 of 14, 9 of 11, 5 straight. This is your longest winning streak in this series history. You got to go. You better. I mean, when I say trust me, they want to beat you.
Yeah.
More than they almost want to beat anybody else. They're not going to feel sorry for you.
Wow, Jake, what incredible takes.
I mean, those guys, they're just the best.
I think so. And if you think so, again, hit the like button, subscribe, ring the bell so you get notifications when we post every single day here on OTB LSU.